Psalm 14:1 says, "The fool says in his heart, there is no God." Yeah, but the rational, intelligent person looks at the evidence and comes to the conclusion that there just isn't any reason to believe that there are any gods whatsoever. But don't tell the religious that. They'll just froth at the mouth and call you names. Today we look at what I'm assuming is part of a sermon by Stephen Lawson, where he sets out to insult atheists by calling us fools for not falling for his irrational and ultimately silly beliefs about his imaginary friend. Like so many before him, he's convinced that absolutely everything leads directly to his deity, even though nothing actually does. But this isn't about facts, it's about feelings for him. Who cares if he's right, so long as it makes him happy? But that's not how reality functions, is it? So let's go watch him, as is no surprise, fall down like the delusional fool that he is.
To say that there is no God, the Bible says, makes one a fool. Only a fool would come to such a foolish conclusion.
And what makes you think that the Bible is true? Because that's the immediate question that arises from this statement, and that's a question that the religious simply cannot answer. As we've seen before, they insist that their favorite book of choice must be true without ever stopping to demonstrate that it actually is. Why? Because they couldn't do it if they tried. To Christians, the Bible is absolutely true without any kind of confirmatory evidence required. To Muslims, it's the Quran. To other religions, it's their book, whatever that happens to be. All of them are simply demanded as true without ever being shown to be true. Funny how that works, isn't it? Why should we take any of these unsupported claims seriously at all?
Now, the word fool, Nabal, does not mean a person of mental incompetence. It means one of moral perversity.
In other words, anyone who doesn't do what you want them to do. Because ultimately, that's what all of this comes down to. It's about one side making demands and then insulting anyone on the other side for not complying. Again, that's exactly why the religious never actually address these rants to those who disagree with them. We'd point out exactly what they're doing, unlike the religiously gullible in the audience, who are just going to lap it up because it plays on their already existing biases. If he was actually talking to atheists, we'd have shouted him down a couple of times already, and he can't have that, can he? So he has to talk to those who already agree. It's just a giant theological circle jerk.
They don't have head problems, they have heart problems.
Nope. My heart functions just fine, thanks. And so does my head. It apparently works far better than yours does, or you wouldn't be making all of these clear and obvious mistakes. Stop trying to diagnose people and just deal with reality.
Such fools are often very bright people with high intellect and with impeccable academic credentials. They are not a fool in the sense that they are moronic or they do not have the capacity to connect thoughts together. No, they very often are some of the brightest minds in all of the world. The problem lies far deeper than their heads. Their problem is their heart.
No, your problem is that you don't understand where rational thought comes from. We are smarter than you are. All of the studies clearly show that. We're better educated than you are. We know more about your religion than you do. We are far more accomplished in general than the religious. The problem is you do not respect intellect when it gets in the way of your feelings. You're not interested in being intellectually correct, logically consistent, or factually objective. No, you only care about feeling good. And if you have to believe utter nonsense to get that dopamine hit in the brain, then you do that without batting an eye. The problem here isn't us, it's you. It's always been you. It will always be you. It's yet another reason why you don't talk to us. You only talk to other stupid and gullible people who just don't think too deeply about much of anything. Because if you talk to us, we'd trash you in an instant.
The fool has said in his heart. The fool is one who spurns the clear evidence that is set before him concerning the reality of God.
And where is this supposedly clear and obvious evidence for God? Because, we're still waiting. Of course, he'll never admit it because this isn't about facts, it's about fifis. These people are overly emotional children who, unfortunately, will never grow up. It's easier to pretend that you've got a good handle on things if you don't pay much attention to reality. It says something in my book that I'm not going to think about. I'm just going to blindly have faith in it and insist that, it must be true because I want to feel good, not be objectively correct in anything that I believe. We have a word for that. You people are being delusional. And this is defined as characterized by or holding idiosyncratic beliefs or impressions that are contradicted by reality or rational argument, typically as a symptom of mental disorder. You people are sick. Seek professional help immediately.
And makes a fundamental decision of unbelief based upon the evidence that is presented to him.
Again, where is that evidence? You people keep saying there's evidence. Where is it? Because you people are buried so deep in confirmation bias that I don't think you understand what any of the words coming out of your mouths even mean anymore. Now, I apologize for playing the definition game today, but I think it's important. Evidence is the available body of facts or information indicating whether a belief or proposition is true or valid. But we go beyond that to insist on some objective evidence, and that is defined as information based on facts that can be proved by means of search like analysis, measurement, and observation. One can examine and evaluate objective evidence. That is something that the religious simply do not have in any way, shape, or form. Instead, what they have is confirmation bias. They have to come to a conclusion emotionally, not rationally, and because they insist that their conclusion must be true because it makes them feel good, even though it is entirely rationally unsupportable, absolutely everything starts to look like proof that they were right all along. At least if you look at it sideways. Because they believe they cannot be mistaken, having any kind of intellectual argument with them, it's all a pointless waste of time. It's why they only talk to themselves. We're sick and tired of them.
There is, by this fool, a deliberate and intentional rejection and refusal of God Himself. The heart here refers to the entire inner person.
Which is just a rationalization because at the time that the Bible was written, that's not what it meant. The ancient Egyptians, for example, like many other ancient peoples, believed that the human heart, not the brain, was the source of human emotion and wisdom. And they were simply wrong. But because our theist here can't admit that the Bible was mistaken, a simple product of simple, ignorant human minds, he has to rationalize why what they said thousands of years ago must suddenly mean something entirely different today. So once again, we have to turn to the definition of words. A rationalization is the action of attempting to explain or justify behavior or an attitude with logical reasons, even if these are not appropriate. These people are doing intelligence wrong. Is anyone really surprised?
It's not heart as the Greek thinks of heart, which is simply more the affections. To the Hebrew mind, the heart represented the entire inner life, the mind, the emotion, the conscience, the will, the entire inner being of a person.
And if they thought that that came from the human heart, they were simply wrong. Facts matter whether our theist here likes it or not. If they couldn't get the basic facts correct, how can we trust anything else that they thought without independent verification? Rational people look at these statements and recognize that there's something going on here, but the irrational, the religious, they don't see a contradiction at all. They are desperate to get through all of the false and misleading ideas that the ancient Hebrews had because, who really cares about that? They want to get to the parts that make them feel good, even though they're all based on those faulty and ludicrous ideas. There is something severely wrong with the religious mindset, but you'll never get them to admit it, will you?
The atheist, the fool, has said in his heart.
We can't say anything in our hearts, metaphorically or physically. Please get it right.
He says there is no God.
Funny because, most atheists don't say that at all. We say that there's no evidence that would lead us to the rational conclusion that any gods, not just yours, but any gods exist at all. Now, that's hardly a surprise that he doesn't know that because the religious tend to be simple-minded and simplistic thinkers, and, as should be no surprise, they don't actually bother to talk to or understand anyone outside of their childish social club. They just make things up about those that they disagree with, not based on evidence or experience or observation, but based on the reactions that they want to get from their own membership. They're looking for an enemy, so, they just make one up. Then they explain exactly what we're like, no matter how absurdly inaccurate it is. Then they pretend that, they have to be right because, they really wish that they were, and that's pretty much all there is to it. It really is ridiculous when you think about it.
You should know in the original Hebrew language, the words there is not found in the original manuscript. The translators have supplied there is to make this read more smoothly. And in the original language, it simply says, the fool has said in his heart, no God.
That's not what the original Hebrew said either, but hey, don't let reality get in the way of a good story, right? He's desperately trying to spin it like atheists know that there's a God. We're just rejecting him for personal, often emotional reasons. They think we're just like they are. This is, of course, ridiculous, but look at the source, right?
In other words, the evidence for God has been presented, and there has been a deliberate, intentional refusal of God.
Where is this evidence? You keep saying this, but you don't actually have any evidence. See, these people think that just saying there's a God or having a book that says there's a God, that somehow means that they've now proven that this God of theirs actually exists. And they're wrong. They've done nothing of the sort. We expect a whole lot more than that. We expect direct, objectively verifiable, demonstrable, and testable evidence that the God that they believe in, the God that they claim exists, the very specific God in their book, actually does exist in the real world. And they can't provide it. And they know they can't provide it. So, what the hell? Let's just play make-believe, right? Because this isn't about getting to the bottom of a mystery. It's about feeling good about the things that you believe, whether they're true or not. How dumb is that?
It would be as if I'd come to your house and I sat down at your table, and in the distributing of the portions of the food for the meal, and you pass, let's say, the potatoes to me, and I clearly see the potatoes, and I put up my hands and I just say, "No potatoes for me."
But you can actually see the potatoes, unlike your God. You can test for the potatoes. You can't test for your God. Either this guy is seeing things that aren't there, which I guess is entirely possible, or he doesn't understand basic logic and critical thinking, which is even more likely. If someone says that there's invisible, intangible, universe-creating pixies in your freezer, and you open it up and you see nothing, you can test for nothing, you can detect nothing, then you shouldn't be convinced that it's there at all, regardless of how the idea might make you feel. You should demand further evidence until you are actually convinced intellectually that it is true, or that it is likely true, based on the objective evidence presented. The religious, they don't work that way, any more than the crazy people who believe in Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster do. It's an emotional thing, not an intellectual thing to them. These people are idiots.
I see it, there it is, and there is an adamant rejection. It's not that I do not believe that the potatoes are there. I see them, and there is a decision on my part to turn away from what is presented to me.
Except you still haven't shown us God. You just haven't. You might insist that this God thing you believe in is real. Delusional people on the street corner might see hallucinations and see things that aren't objectively there, and they believe it. But you can't accept that you just might be the one with the problem. You insist that it's everyone who doesn't agree with you. You people have mental issues. Seek help.
That is what David is saying here. The fool has said in the depths of his soul.
Which soul is this exactly? Because that's yet another thing that you people believe in that has no objective evidence for its existence whatsoever. We keep going around and around and around with these people, and it never gets any better, nor do they learn any lessons. It's like talking to that crazy-haired, filthy lunatic standing on a soapbox on the corner, screaming about the end of the world. You know, the guy yelling that if you don't accept the will of Blarg, you're going to be consumed in the coming zombie apocalypse or something stupid like that. And when you ask him about Blarg while dialing up the local funny farm on your phone, and he tells you that Blarg is, well, he's right there dancing a jig, you don't believe him. You tell him to get the help that he so desperately and obviously needs. And here's something else, something I know a lot of you have figured out, but you know why the religious are not universally declared mentally incompetent by the psychiatric establishment? It's because they have to make money. If they told the majority of the population that they were out of their ever-loving minds, nobody would ever pay them for a consultation. They'd go out of business. If you went to Ireland, for example, and everyone there believed in leprechauns, you wouldn't find any Irish psychiatrists declaring that belief in leprechauns was irrational. Why? Because they'd be out of business by the end of the week. Delusion is defined as beliefs, usually strong beliefs, that are not amenable to change, that are not consistent with the real world. And that's a perfect description of religion for you, folks. But the simple reality is, we can't just put all of these lunatics away, and no group of psychiatrists would ever try, because it would be financial and political suicide. So, we just have to put up with them.
No God. There is no God for me.
There is no God in evidence for anyone. You just wish that there was. It makes you feel good to think that there is. You desperately want there to be. It makes you happy to think that there is a God. And that doesn't mean that there is a God.
I will have nothing to do with God.
You can't have anything to do with anything that doesn't demonstrably exist. I will have nothing to do with leprechauns. Why? Because there's no rational reason to think that leprechauns are real. It doesn't matter how much you wish that they were, until you can actually demonstrate with objectively verifiable evidence that they actually are. No one in their right mind has any business whatsoever believing in it.
But on the inside, there is the recognition that there is a God in heaven, but I do not want God to run my life or tell me how to live. I will go my own way. I will be the captain of my own ship. I will be the master of my own destiny.
Yet another common but absolutely ridiculous claim. Of course we all know that his imaginary friend is real. Of course we do. How could we not? So instead of asking atheists what we really think, they just make something up and pretend they've got it all right. It's yet another delusion that no one will dare call them on. Why would they? It's financial suicide. It's a good thing I've got no profit motive, huh? These people are out of their ever-loving minds.
When God is presented to me, and the evidence of God in creation and God consciousness and the truth about God is made known to me.
When is that going to happen? Because you haven't quite gotten around to it. Just because you expect people to look at the trees and come to the same irrational conclusions that you do, sorry, but you're just wrong. I will believe in your God when there is direct, objectively verifiable evidence that your God in particular, actually demonstrably exists in the reality that we all share. And to do that, you're going to have to do a whole lot better than you've done. Get to work.
I will adamantly set my jaw and say, no, God.
Yeah, not so much. Because this whole thing is laughable on its face. Whoever this Stephen Lawson guy is, he is clearly not a very intelligent thinker. He's preaching to the choir, literally, without a clue. He couldn't find his ass with both of his hands in a map. It's why atheists look at this guy and laugh. He's a joke to everyone but those who already believe the crap coming out of his mouth. That's why the only people he dares to talk to are the ones who are already on board with his lunacy. He's terrified to talk to anyone who doesn't already buy into his garbage, because we won't accept the Bible as a reliable source of information, at least not unless he can prove that it is. We won't take faith as a means to know anything, at least not unless he can prove that it is. And without that, he's lost. He has nothing else that he can say. He's like that guy on the street corner, frothing at the mouth, screaming, "God is over there!" Substitute God for any other crazy belief, and nothing he says changes. There is something seriously wrong with his brain. He's incapable of applying logic and reason to his religious beliefs. Just because it's a common delusion doesn't stop it from being a delusion. Popularity doesn't change reality. Maybe it's time we recognize that as the simple and obvious fact that it is.
Boom, dicky bum, 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 dicky bum.